On a spring night in 2017, Jennifer Elliott disappeared from her home. Certain that something was wrong, her mom took to the streets, hoping to find clues as to where her daughter had gone. But then she heard a strange sound emanating from a shed, and when she investigated, a horrifying story began to unfold. Elliott, aged 30, lived with her mother, Gail Rowe, and her son in Blanchester. The small town is located some 40 miles east of Cincinnati, Ohio, and the family seemed to be on warm terms with their neighbors. However, an unthinkable crime was about to intrude on their lives. In the early hours of April 26, 2017, Rowe returned home. She decided to look in on the other two occupants of the house, but while she found her grandson peacefully slumbering in bed, Elliott was nowhere to be seen. Unable to explain Elliott's absence, Rowe decided to contact the police, and at around 1:30 a.m. she reported her daughter missing. Soon a police supervisor arrived on the scene. However, they could find no trace of the missing woman. Increasingly worried about her daughter, Rowe took matters into her own hands. With the help of a neighbor, she began scouring the vicinity for any sign of Elliott. Then, in a nearby alleyway, Rowe noticed a strange sound. Speaking to local news channel WCPO, she described the noise as sounded like pecking. Rowe said she wondered if the sound had been made by a cat, but she then apparently realized that the noise was coming from a shed on a neighbor's property. She began banging on its side and then called out, "Jennifer, if you're in there, peck again so we know you're in there," she recalled saying. "We'll get you out." Shockingly, a sound came in reply. For Rowe, it was enough to notify the authorities, and while she was on the telephone to the police, she apparently heard weeping begin to emanate from the shed. When an officer arrived, however, they discovered that the structure was locked shut. Eventually, the officer was able to break into the shed with a crowbar. Inside, they apparently discovered that someone had dug a hole beneath the structure. Once they'd worked their way through the floor, they reportedly discovered Elliott crammed into a pit just 2 feet across and a little over 3 feet deep. A piece of wood covered the pit and had been weighted down with a selection of heavy items. By the time that the officer rescued the terrified woman, she was reportedly unable to speak. It seemed like she was experiencing an epileptic seizure, her rescuers later noted. If Rowe hadn't discovered Elliott, she said, her daughter would have been unlikely to have made it out of the situation alive. "If we wouldn't have found her, she would be dead," she told WCPO. Though Elliott wasn't showing any obvious signs of physical injury, she was taken to Clinton Memorial Hospital in nearby Wilmington. But how had Elliott ended up in the pit? The shed was apparently located on the property of Dennis Dunn, a local man with a history of mental health problems. Unsure of what to expect and suspecting that Dunn might be armed, the officer called for support. More officers arrived, along with a warrant to search Dunn's home. Given Dunn's record and the possibility that he had an assault rifle, a tactical team was called in to enter the house. At around 8 p.m. though, Dunn apparently came to the front door unprompted and looking as if he didn't have a care in the world. According to Scott Reinbold, Blanchester's chief of police, Dunn seemed to have little awareness of the drama that had been unfolding outside his property. In fact, he described the suspect as looking like he was about to walk his dog. An officer swiftly arrested Dunn. With Dunn in custody, it soon emerged that this wasn't the 45-year-old's first encounter with Elliott. In fact, she'd apparently lodged a complaint about her neighbor in October of 2016. Dunn had allegedly been making harassing calls and sending her unwanted messages. Ultimately, Elliott had decided not to press charges against Dunn. However, according to Rowe, the man remained obsessed with her daughter. In an interview with WCPO, she explained that Dunn was nursing a crazy crush on Elliott. "He's just got it in his head," she said. And that wasn't the only time that Dunn had found himself in trouble with the law. His record apparently showed drug-related arrests dating back as far as 2007, as well as a number of other charges. Furthermore, one weekend, just weeks before the kidnapping, Dunn had contacted police on multiple occasions, reporting that intruders were trying to enter his home, though no one could be found at the scene. Later in the weekend, neighbors called the police to report Dunn, who was spotted outside his home brandishing a gun. After this incident, he was taken to a nearby hospital to have his mental health evaluated. 2 days later, he was released. Even before the kidnapping, Police Chief Reinbold said he had observed that Dunn's condition was evidence of the poor state of psychiatric care in Ohio. Meanwhile, Rowe grew suspicious that Dunn might have assaulted her daughter before. Elliott had apparently also gone missing in 2016. Though she was eventually located in the backyard, the incident remained shrouded in mystery. Elliot had had a seizure which left her unable to fully recall the incident. However, she gradually regained some memories of what happened, and she recalled being attacked from behind. For Emily No, a friend of Dunn who lived nearby, the incident came as a shock. "He's played with my kids. I've watched his house for him, watched his dogs for him. I've hung out with him for hours on end," she told the Wilmington News Journal. "Not in a million years could I see him do this." On May 4th, 2017, Elliot testified in court that Dunn had confessed his love for her before leaving her trapped inside the tiny pit. With his bail fixed at $1 million, the suspect was set to face charges of kidnapping in front of a grand jury. Dunn's attorneys argued that his mental health was too poor for him to stand trial. The prosecution apparently disagreed, though they accepted that he displayed symptoms comparable to schizophrenia. It was a sad case. However, one can only be thankful that Elliot survived the terrible ordeal that she suffered.